Good morning, everyone. This is Russell Rucker, and I'm here for another constitutional talk. Now, I thought we'd get back to our Federalist papers this week. It's been several weeks since we went through one, and we're up to Federalist VI. Now, what makes this interesting is the context in which they're talking about this. We're going to be discussing some English history here, and keep in mind that up to this point, yes, we'd won the war. Yes, we had Articles of Confederation. But up till now, these people were still feeling as if they had been part of Britain. They had been part of Britain for a long time. And so they knew British history very well. And so I want you, when we go through this, I want you to think about that and realize where they're actually coming from. And some of this may be difficult for many of you. But this is Hamilton, Alexander Hamilton, our first treasurer, one of the three that worked on the Federalist Papers. And this is Federalist number 6. To the people of the state of New York. For the 3 last numbers of this paper have been dedicated to an enumeration of the dangers of which we should be exposed in a state of disunion. From the arms and arts of foreign nations, I shall now proceed to delineate dangers of a different and perhaps still more alarming kind, those which will in all probability flow from dissensions between the states themselves and from the domestic factations and convulsions. These have already, in some instances, slightly anticipated, but they deserve a more particular and more full investigation. A man must be gone in utopian speculation who can seriously doubt that if those states should either be wholly disunited or only united in partial confederacies, the subdivisions into which they might be thrown would have frequent and violent contests with each other. To presume a want of motives for such contests as an argument against their existence would be to forget that men are ambitious, vindictive, and rapacious. To look for a continuation of harmony between a number of independent, unconnected sovereignties in the same neighborhood would be to disregard the uniform course of human events, and to act at defiance and accumulated experience of ages. And that's where he's about to go here to describe many of these problems. The causes of hostility among nations are innumerable. They are some which have a general and almost constant operation upon the collective bodies of society. Of this description are the love of power, or the desire of preeminence and dominion, the jealousy of power, or the desire of equality and safety. There are others which have more circumscribed through an equally operative influence within their spheres. Such are the rivalships and competitions of commerce between commercial nations. And there are others not less numerous than either of the former, which take their origin entirely in private passions, in the attachments, enmities, interests, hopes, and fears of leading individuals in the communities of which they are members. Men of this class, whether the favorites of a king or of a people, have in too many instances abused the confidence they possessed, and assuming the pretext of some public motive, have not scrupled to sacrifice the national tranquility to personal advantage or personal gratification. The celebrated Pericles, in compliance with the resentment of a prostitute, at the expense of much of the blood and treasure of his countrymen, attacked, vanquished, destroyed the city of Samians. The same man, stimulated by private pique against the Mycenaeans, another nation of Greece, or to avoid a prosecution with which he was threatened as an accomplice in a supposed theft of the statuary of Phidias, or to get rid of the accusations prepared to be brought against him for dissipating the funds of the state in the purchase of popularity, or from a combination of all these causes, was the primitive author of that famous and fatal war, distinguished in the Grecian annals by the name of the Peloponnesian War, which after various vicissitudes, intermissions, and renewals terminated in the ruin of the Athenian Commonwealth. The ambitious cardinal, who was prime minister to Henry VIII, permitted his vanity to aspire to the Triple Crown, entered hopes of succeeding in the acquisition of that splendid prize in the influence of the Emperor Charles V to secure the favor and interest of this enterprising and powerful monarch. He precipitated England into a war with France, contrary to the plainest dictates of policy, and at the hazard of the safety and independence as well of the kingdom over which he presided by his counsels as of Europe in general. For if there ever was a sovereign who bid fair to realize the project of universal monarchy, it was the Emperor Charles V, of whose intrigues Wolsey was at once the instrument and the dupe. The influence which the bigotry of one female, the petulance of another, and the cabals of a third had in the contemporary policy, ferments, and pacifications of a considerable part of Europe are topics that have been too often decanted upon, not too generally known. To multiply examples of the agency of personal considerations in the production of great national events, either foreign or domestic, according to their direction, would be an unnecessary waste of time. Those who have been a superficial acquaintance with the source from which they are to be drawn with themselves recollect a variety of instances, and those who have a tolerable knowledge of human nature will not stand in need of such lights to form their opinion, either of the reality or extent of that agency. Perhaps, however, a reference tending to illustrate the general principle may with propriety be made to a case in which has lately happened among ourselves. If Shays had not been a desperate debtor, it is much to be doubted whether Massachusetts would have plunged into a civil war. Here he is referring to our Shays Rebellion. Notwithstanding the concurring testimony of experience in this particular, there are still to be found visionary or designing men who stand ready to advocate the paradox of perpetual peace between the states, though dismembered and alienated from each other. The genius of republics, say they, as pacific, the spirit of commerce has a tendency to soften the manners of men and to extinguish those inflammable humors which have so often kindled into war. Commercial republics like ours will never be disposed to waste themselves in ruinous contentions with each other. They will be governed by mutual interest and will cultivate a spirit of mutual amity and concord. It is not, we may ask these projectors in politics, the true interest of all nations to cultivate the same benevolent and philosophic spirit. If this be their true interest, have they in fact pursued it? Has it not, on the contrary, invariably been found that momentary passions and immediate interest have a more active and imperious control over human conduct than general or remote considerations of policy, utility, or justice? Have republics in practice been less addicted to war than monarchs? Are not the former administered by men as well as the latter? Are there not aversions, predictions, rivalships, and desires of unjust acquiescence that affect nations as well as kings? Are not popular assemblies frequently subject to the impulses of rage, resentment, jealousy, avarice, and of other irregular and violent propensities? It is not well enough known that their determinations are often governed by a few individuals in whom they place confidence, and are of course liable to the tincture of by the passions and views of those individuals. Has commerce hitherto done anything more than change the objects of war? Is not the love of wealth as domineering and enterprising a passion as that of power or glory? Have there not been as many wars founded upon commercial motives, since that has become the prevailing system of nations, as were before occasioned by the cupidity of territory or dominance? Has not the spirit of commerce in many instances administered new incentives in the appetite both for the one and for the other? Let experience, the least fallible guide of human opinions, be appealed to for an answer to those inquiries. Sparta, Athens, Rome, and Carthage were all republics. Two of them, Athens and Carthage, of the commercial kind, yet were they as often engaged in wars, offensive and defensive, as the neighboring monarchs of the same time. Sparta was little better than a well-regulated camp, and Rome was never stated of carnage and conquest. Carthage, though a commercial republic, was the aggressor in the very war that ended in her destruction. Hannibal had carried her arms into the heart of Italy and to the gates of Rome, before Scipio in turn gave him an overthrower in the territories of Carthage and made a conquest of the Commonwealth. Venice in later times figured more than once in wars of ambition, till becoming an object of the other Italian states. Pope Julius II found means to accomplish that formidable league, which gave a deadly blow to the power and pride of the haughty republic. The provinces of Holland, till they were overwhelmed in debts and taxes, took a leading and conspicuous part in the wars of Europe. They had furious contests with England for the domination of the sea, and were among the most persevering and most implacable of the opponents of Louis XIV. In the government of Britain, the representatives of the people compose one branch of the national legislature. Commerce has been for ages the predominant pursuit of that country. Few nations, nevertheless, have been more frequently engaged in war, and the wars in which that kingdom has been engaged here is numerous instances. proceeded from the people. There have been, if I may so express it, almost as many popular as royal wars. The cries of the nation and the importunities of the representatives have upon various occasions dragged their monarchs into war or continued them in it, contrary to the inclinations and sometimes contrary to the real interests of the state, in that memorable struggle for superiority between the rival houses of Austria and Bourbon, which so long kept Europe in a flame. It is well known that the antipathies of the English against the French, seconding the ambition, or rather the avarice, of a favorite leader, protracted the war between the limits marked out by sound policy and for considerable time in opposition to the views of the court. The wars of these two last mentioned nations have in great measure grown out of the commercial considerations and desires for supplanting and for the fear of being supplanted, either in particular branches of traffic or in the general advantages of trade and navigation. From the summary of what has taken place in other countries whose situations have borne the nearest resemblance to our own, what reason can we have to confide in those reveries which would seduce us into an expectation of peace and cordiality between the members of the present confederacy in a state of separation? Have we not already seen enough of the fallacy and extravagance of those idle theories which have amused us with promises of an exemption from imperfections, weakness, and evils incidents to society in every shape? It is not time to awake from the deceitful dream of a golden age and to adopt as a practical maxim for the direction of our political conduct that we, as well as other inhabitants of the globe, are not yet remote from the happy empire of perfect wisdom and perfect virtue. Let the point of extreme depression to which our national dignity and credit have sunk, let the inconveniences felt everywhere from a lax and ill administration of government, let the revolt of a part of the state of North Carolina and the late menacing disturbance to Pennsylvania and the actual insurrections and rebellions in Massachusetts declare, so far is the general sense of mankind from corresponding with the tenets of those who endeavor to lull asleep our apprehensions of discord and hostility between the states in the event of disunion, that it has, from long observation of the progress of society, become a sort of axiom in politics, with vicinity of nearness of situation, constituents, nations, natural enemies. An intelligent writer expresses himself on this subject to this effect: neighboring nations, says he, are naturally enemies of each other, unless their common weakness forces them to league in a confirmable republic. And their constitutions prevent the differences that the neighborhood occasions, extinguishing the secret jealousies which disposes all states to aggregate themselves in the expense of their neighbors. This passage, at the same time, points out the evil and suggests the remedy. And he signs it Publius. Now, he mentions some of the states here, and, you know, frankly, when he mentions North Carolina, they actually had to go through 2 different ratifying conventions because initially they turned down the Constitution. States will fight amongst each other. There will be jealousies amongst each other, even today, with many people leaving certain states and flowing to other states. It creates definite jealousies. There are differences between the states. But the whole idea Hamilton is trying to get to here is it's better off to be united than divided. It's better off to work together than to be warring with one another. And as he's arguing for union, and that's what all the Federalist Papers are, they're arguments for a union, specifically for New York to approve the Constitution. We really want all the states combined in this union because it makes it much easier to work with a united group than a group of various political societies that become separate nations. All these different republics he talks about, and the failures of the republics, and failures of other governing force. Still, Hamilton believes that we are better off united than in separate confederacies. I know a lot of what he discusses here is difficult for many of our modern citizens to understand because they haven't been taught the history of ancient Rome and Greece. And it takes a little bit of understanding to delve into it. But the point is still the same. Kings make mistakes. Popular wars can be mistakes. We don't want to live in a constant state of war. And the best way to not be in a constant state is having a united country, that all the colonies are united together. Peace is important. But peace without liberty is just slavery. That, my friend, is the important thing to realize. Liberty. Liberty is what's important. Think about that, folks. And I'll catch you next week, next time, on the next Constitutional Talk. You folks have a good day for now. Bye.